Hey guys, Mitch Fitzpatrick here with Amanda Wheeler with Applied Ballistics LLC. And today we're going to be setting up the scope and mounting a scope on Amanda's new rifle here. Amanda, why don't you tell us a little bit about what this rifle is, what your plans are with it. I know you're kind of just getting into long range shooting, so what do we got going on here?
So I got a Macmillan A10 stock with a Stiller Wraith action. It's chambered in 6.5 Creedmoor. Precision or 5x5 precision chambered it for me.
Okay.
I have a APA little bastard muzzle brake. We have a Trigger Tech trigger and a Hawkins precision bottom metal.
Yep.
I also got this Atlas 5H bipod, and then we're gonna put the Vortex Gen 2 razor on it for me.
Okay.
Yeah,
and this is a Bartlein barrel too, right?
Yes, a Bartlein barrel.
Sweet.
Yes.
Okay, yep, and we got some Vortex rings. Yep. That's where we're gonna mount them in. And we also have a Holland bubble level.
Yes.
So that'll be our scope level. And so you've been shooting a 22 long rifle for a while. You've got a Voodoo.
Yes.
And now you're stepping up to the 6.5 Creedmoor. Are you thinking, kind of as like a training rifle, getting used to something a little bit longer range, something a little bit bigger, maybe possibly shooting some PRS matches?
Yes, all of those things.
Okay, sweet.
My end goal would be to come and compete with you guys at some ELR matches.
Okay. Yeah, this is a really good stepping stone to get to that point.
Yeah, I'm excited. Okay,
so the first step that we're gonna do to mount this scope is we're gonna level up the rifle. Now there's a few different ways guys go about mounting scopes. I'm not gonna say one way is necessarily better than the other. This is how we typically do it, and we get really good results doing it. So it's one way you can approach this, and it's a way we recommend. So the first thing we're gonna do is level up the rifle. You can see I've got a little bubble level here, and I've already actually leveled it. So Amanda, you can see there, we've got the rifle level based on the top rail of the scope rail. So now that we've got that level, we're gonna take the scope rings here, and we're gonna mount them on the action. And it's not super critical exactly where we put them yet, because we're gonna have to fine tune it as we set up your eye relief and as we get the scope kind of set up.
Okay, so we're not going to screw these down yet because we may need to shift them based on what we find when we put this.
Yeah, we won't torque them down. I'm going to tighten them up just so they're not rattling around and loose.
Okay.
And I'm definitely not going to tighten them up until we have the scope in there, because the scope's going to help keep everything nice and straight. So now that we've got that set up there, we're going to take the scope and we're going to see how it kind of fits. It's looking pretty good. I think we're going to move this front ring to the furthest forward point. I think that's pretty close to where it's going to end up, and we'll have you check your eye relief here in a minute. And you can tell the height of the rings are good. We've got a little bit of clearance there on the barrel, so we're not worried about the scope hitting the barrel under recoil, because they do flex a bit. Set this back out of the way.
So moving this forward, what does that do for you?
It's going to gain us a little bit more room on the scope with where the rings can be on the scope tube.
Okay.
So now that's all the way forward. I think the position of the rear one was pretty good. So now I'm going to get those a little bit tighter so we don't have to worry about them falling off, because we don't want the scope falling off. So like I said, we're just getting them tight so it can't fall off the gun.
Okay.
I shouldn't say tight. We're not torquing them down. We're just taking up the slack. All right, now we're going to set the scope back up here. It's looking pretty good. The rear scope ring could probably come back slightly further and maintain the eye relief. So I'm going to do first a quick initial check here.
Okay.
Looking real good. Okay, so now we're going to have you check the eye relief for you, because obviously this is your rifle. You're going to be shooting it. I got it close. So I'm going to square it up a little bit so that you can get square behind it. I want to have you come over here, get behind the rifle like you're going to be shooting it.
Okay.
All right. So can you see clearly through the scope? Can you see all the way out to the edge clear, or is it kind of dark around the edges?
A little dark on the edge.
Okay. Is that better or worse?
That's much better.
All right. So we had to bring the scope a little bit closer to your eye.
Okay.
Okay. So now we've got that. I'm going to take a little piece of tape to mark kind of the position of the scope in relationship to that front ring.
Okay.
Because we know we like that. And now that I know where it's good for your eye relief, we actually have room to move this scope ring back a little bit further, get a wider spacing on the scope ring, and support the scope a little bit better.
Oh, okay.
Another thing that's worth pointing out is that depending on your application, whether it's PRS, more positional shooting, you know, all prone, ELR, hunting, you may want to set your eye relief a little bit differently to account for different ways of getting behind the rifle.
Okay.
And that's something we can always fine tune later if we decide we need to after you shoot it some.
Okay. So if I change the position of these in the future, do we have to do a whole nother tall target test?
It would be best to do
Okay.
a whole other tall target test. And as you'll see when we do the tall target test, is it's really easy to do. And it's just that sanity check to just make sure your entire system is working properly.
Okay.
So now that we know where the scope eye relief is at, we're ready to put it on there, get the top caps of the rings on, and we'll start working with the scope level.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're gonna get the level ready to go on the scope. We're gonna confirm the level of the rifle, and then we're gonna put the top caps of the rings on. So first things first here, just since we've kind of been handling some stuff and changing some stuff, just gonna verify that the rifle is level. Again, it's not super critical. We just do that because we like to, the way we set up and run our rifles and scopes is we try to keep everything pretty much level. But there, you can have some flexibility there if you like to have the rifle slightly canted. So that looks good. Now we're gonna take the scope and we're gonna take the level and we're gonna mount it on there so that the level is just above your side focus and just to the left of your turret. And then we'll check to see if that position is going to work for you.
Okay.
And if it is, then that's good. We'll make sure that it clears the rings in that position. So again, I'm not going to torque it on. I'm just getting it on there enough so that it won't fall off. Okay, so now we're going to check the placement of the level in regards to the scope rings. So we need to move it forward a little bit. So we do have clearance there. Okay, so we know that the level will not interfere with the rings at that point.
Okay.
So I'm going to tighten this up. So now I'm going to have you come around to the back side of the rifle, kind of like you're getting behind it, and see if you can see the level.
I can.
Okay, can you see both of the lines?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And then we know that position is going to work as we level up the rifle.
Okay.
Next, we're going to put the top caps on the rings. So we're just going to get these on here enough to not allow the scope to fall off, but we still need it loose enough to adjust things.
And you're alternating like that.
Yeah, it's just habit because when we actually torque them down, we're going to alternate kind of in a crisscross pattern.
Like when you do your tires.
Yes, yes, like when you do your tires. So now to level up the scope with the rifle is a cool little trick that we typically use. You have like a straight edge. This level has a straight edge on it. And we can reference off the flat on the bottom of the scope to the flats on the rail on the rifle. Okay, so right there, you can let go of it.
Okay.
So now we looked at the information on the packaging for the Vortex scope rings with their scopes. They recommend torquing to 18 inch-pounds. So we're going to set the torque wrench to 18 inch-pounds. Okay, and now we're going to torque these in a cross pattern. Now I haven't torqued it quite yet because I want to make sure the gap on the rings is consistent on both sides. Same on the front. Confirm the position with for our eye relief is consistent.
So what are some of the things that could happen if you over torque or
Yeah,
you're
so
not consistent with this?
Yep, if you over torque the scope or you have some sort of uneven torquing, what you can potentially end up with is you could crush the tube of the scope, which is going to affect the internals.
Okay.
It can cause the scope to not hold a zero. It can mess up your tracking. You know, sometimes like your focus might not. The focus might lock up because you've compressed things on the inside of the scope.
Okay.
So you really don't want to over torque.
Okay. So it's important.
Yep. So we've got the gaps pretty even on the rings. We're going to do another check to make sure the scope didn't change position in relation to the gun. Now that we've confirmed the scope hasn't changed position in relationship to the rifle, so everything's level this way, we're going to continue torquing. And I like to do it very progressively to keep the gaps even, and also just to ensure everything's nice and consistent. So I usually go in, roughly 4 to 5 steps of this pattern. So that click means we got the torque right. Okay, so now those are torqued to the 18 inch-pounds, which is the spec with Vortex. Now that all of that's together, we're actually going to go through and torque the cross bolts that are holding the scope rings and the scope to the action.
Okay.
The spec on that per Vortex is 45 to 50 inch-pounds. Because we're using a good torque wrench, we're going to go to the 50 inch-pounds.
Okay.
So again, I kind of just do it progressively. Make sure everything's seating properly. Now I'm going to torque the front one here. 50. So I'm going to torque that one to 50. Then I come to the rear one over here. Torque that to 50. Rear one over here. Another common mistake or a point of confusion for a lot of people when they're setting up a rifle like this, especially depending on the torque wrench you're looking to buy or that you have access to, is the difference between foot-pounds and inch-pounds. Everything we're working with here is in inch-pounds. If you used foot-pounds, you'd be way over-torquing everything. So just make sure you keep your units consistent and that when the spec says inch-pounds, you're using a torque wrench that is set up in inch-pounds. Or if it has markings for both, make sure you're referencing the inch-pounds.
And is that a wrench you can get from a gun shop or?
Yeah, lots of stores online offer these. Okay. A lot of gun shops will probably offer. Mostly hardware stores too. It doesn't have to be a gun-specific torque wrench. Just in general, lots of things are torqued to torque specs. That's a consistent way of tightening, screws, nuts, bolts, all of that.
Okay.
So hardware stores, gun stores, online gun shooting supply places, they all carry torque wrenches. All right, so the last thing we're going to do is level up the bubble level to the scope. And it's not going to be perfect, but no matter how you set it up, you're never going to know it's perfect until you do a tall target test. Okay. And so the key point here is that a tall target test is critical for validating not only the scope, but your level and ensuring you're going to be able to hit targets at long ranges. So we're going to verify the level of the scope. So we know the scope is level with the rifle. All right, that's perfectly level. Now, obviously, using the top of the turret doesn't necessarily mean it's perfectly level with the reticle or with the actual tracking of the scope, but it's a good reference point in order to set this off of. And then once we do a tall target test, if it's off slightly, we'll be able to make slight adjustments and fine tune it. This just gives us a close starting point.
Okay.
Other ways that you might be able to do this if you have the space is you can actually set up a plumb line at like 100 yards and level up your reticle with the plumb line and then set your level based off of that. Another technique a lot of people used and I've personally used before too, and if you don't have kind of like a custom setup to do it, you kind of have to have 2 people, but you can shine a bright light in a dark room through the scope backwards and actually adjust the focus of everything to imprint the reticle on a wall and have a level line to reference off of, and you can level it up that way as well. But regardless of which one of these methods you use to level up the scope, you still need to do a tall target test to verify, because either you're going off of the turret or you're going off the reticle, which doesn't necessarily mean it's perfectly level with the actual tracking of the scope.
Okay.
So the tall target is going to verify the tracking and the level, and so this is just a good starting point. So we just verified, we'll double check that the scope is in fact level. Yep, it's perfectly level. So now we're going to fine tune Another thing that we typically like to do is rather than have the bubble perfectly in the middle of the two lines, because that's kind of it's a good reference point, but it's not an exact reference point. So what we've done is, we know the scope's level, we adjusted the bubble level slightly so that the edge of the bubble is right on the left line. So you're going to reference the edge of the bubble to the left-hand line,
Okay.
and that's perfectly level. So now at this point, the rifle scope level setup is ready for us to go get a 0 and then conduct a tall target test. And at that point, once we fine-tune things and verify the scope, we'll be ready to go out and hit some targets long range.
Yay, thank you.
If you guys have any questions or want to learn more about this process, you can reach out to us through social media on Instagram or Facebook. We are Applied Ballistics LLC on both platforms. You can also reach out to us through our support email, which is support@appliedballisticsllc.com, or you can reach out to us through our marketing email, which is marketing@appliedballisticsllc.com. We look forward to hearing from you or seeing you out on the range.